From Wall Street as an investment banker, Kunal transitioned to pursuing ventures in both for-profit and nonprofit startups. Kunal followed his passion to do what he calls more fulfilling work, that is, working as an entrepreneur. Kunal is a finance and strategy associate at the nonprofit charity Water. He's also the founder of Meta Apartments and Outpatient, a telemedical venture that will connect patients and physicians through a video conferencing platform. His book, Disruptors, focuses on the reality, and not the glory, of being an entrepreneur. Please join me in welcoming Kunal Mehta. Kunal?
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm going to be holding my phone. I just have a few notes in here, so if I start clicking, I'm not responding to text messages while this is going on. Before I go any further, I just want to thank Eric and the president for putting this entire thing together. It's a huge honor to be here in front of so many kind of distinguished people from the community, so I'm hoping to get a chance to learn from you guys also. I'm going to start off with a couple of quick words, and we can keep it pretty informal and open up for some questions and answers at the end. As way of introduction, my name is Kunal Mehta. I'm a recovering investment banker, an author, and an entrepreneur. About 3 years ago, I left my job on Wall Street in search of some more inspiring and entrepreneurial work. And I hit some early heartbreaks and some failures, but I've since bounced back. I'm now the founder of a real estate venture in New York City. I'm working on a startup called Unfold. Sorry, I've been fighting a little cold. A startup called Unfold that's making sharing and discovering content more easy. And I'm also a former finance and strategy associate from the nonprofit charity Water that's provided clean and safe drinking water to over 5.2 million people worldwide. I think that's impact that really matters. Now, despite where we are in our careers or our professional journeys, many of us in business face a very tough and agonizing decision. And that decision is, do you pursue the high status, high profile, high paying jobs that the BCGs, the McKinseys, the Goldmans offer, where status, reputation, and payment is pretty irrefutable? Or do you pursue something really far off the beaten path? Something where career fulfillment and satisfaction might be more attainable? That's a very tough and agonizing decision that college graduates, young business professionals in their later careers are facing every single day. And it's a decision that I'm hoping our conversations today and the conversations that happen at Otterbein will help make that decision a bit easier. What helped me get through that was through a series of conversations with some of the greatest entrepreneurs of our generation. And these conversations happened at very raw moments in their careers. It happened on one side of the spectrum, a story that we're used to hearing so often, with a 17 or 18-year-old who began building a venture, stumbled on some early successes, got venture backed within 6 months, and found him or herself on the cover of all the big blogs and tech journals and magazines, and found that entrepreneurial fame that so many of us crave. But it also happened on the other side of the spectrum, with someone, and it's a story that I wanted to focus on more because we're so used to hearing that first one. It was someone in their late 30s, early 40s who had been building for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, but never really found that same kind of success. They were building towards something they truly cared about, but never found that fame or the entrepreneurial success that we're all looking for. But what struck was very different, was the fact that despite where they were in their careers, they were building with this fire in their stomach and this passion towards something that they truly cared about. And sitting on Wall Street, where I was doing this repeatable job every single day, I was very jealous about that, and I wanted that same kind of feeling. So I've since published these conversations in a book titled Disruptors with the purpose to inspire more people to pursue work that they truly care about. And I've been on the book tour for over a year, and I've been working with a growing number of disenchanted consultants, lawyers, bankers, corporate escapees, and people who want to do something different, and they want to be someone different, but they don't know how or where to begin. And I can empathize with them because when I was 17, I was offered a full scholarship by JP Morgan to attend the NYU Stern School of Business. And at the time, Wall Street seemed like this great place to be in. Books like Liar's Poker, movies like The Boiler Room, Wolf of Wall Street, glorified this career that it's going to give you all these transferable skills that you work here for 5, 6, 7 years, and then you can go pursue whatever job you want to pursue. You can go and do whatever work you want to do. So at 17, I'm one of the youngest investment bankers, and reality started to set in. By 19, I realized how much I hated it. I wanted to do something different, I wanted to be someone different, and I didn't know how or where to begin. And the problem with these jobs is that you start to develop this false sense of confidence. You have a secure check coming in every 2 weeks. You are interacting with smart people in suits. You're being told by your managers that you're learning skills, you're being set up for this great career. And you start to think that these skills that I'm learning will then transfer to any industry that I want to work in, and I'll be able to have an impact in the place, but I'll just put these next 10, 20 years in, and then I'll do the work that I really care about. But everywhere I was looking around me, there were people younger than myself who were making these incredible advancements in healthcare, in tech, in journalism, in fashion, and just industries that they truly cared about, social impact. And I wanted to be a part of that. I didn't want to be doing this repeatable job every single day. So in that false sense of confidence, I marched into my boss's office and I told him I quit. I want to do something different, I want to be someone different, and this is where it starts. And he had seen it play out so many times before, he kind of laughed, he patted me out, and he's like, all right, go for it. So I walked out the exit doors, and in that confidence, I saw this empty canvas of all these places I can have an impact. And that excitement lasted me a couple of days, it lasted me a week, and then slowly started to set in that I had no idea what the hell I was actually doing. I was lost. My savings account was tested. This resume that I've been building for 6 years was now completely worthless. I mean, startup founders were like, okay, you worked on Wall Street, so what are you really going to bring us? What kind of hustle are you going to bring us? And mentors that I once looked up to, I remember having one pretty discouraging phone call with a mentor who told me to go and beg for my job back, that I'd made a very big mistake during one of the greatest recessions of our generation to leave a secure job on Wall Street. But what kept me going through it, and with this understanding that I didn't like it, what kept me going through it was the fact that there had been hundreds and hundreds of people before me that had left these positions of security or conformity to pursue work that they cared about, and there'd be hundreds after me. I just need to sit down with them and find out from them what those first 6 months to a year look like. How do they bounce back from the early struggles? How do they tell their friends that, you know what, I'm going to go do something very different. I'm not going to have that paycheck coming in anymore, so I'm sorry, I can't buy the drinks at the bar. I can't buy the next round. Or I couldn't tell my parents that, hey, you can tell your friends and family now that you have a son on Wall Street. You have a son that's unemployed and maybe might be moving home. So what did that first 1 year look like? How did they get through that? How do they get through the criticism and the failures and the kind of struggles that entrepreneurship inevitably entails when you're trying to find that elusive passion? So everywhere I went, people would tell me, what's your passion? I had no idea. All I had been doing for the last couple of years was Wall Street, and that's all I'd been thinking. I didn't really know what I liked or what I enjoyed. So when I finally sat down with these entrepreneurs, I didn't want to focus on what those successes were. I didn't want to talk about the next TechCrunch article where they're talking about the next billionaire and how they became there and what their company is valued at and all that PR pieces. I wanted to focus on those first 6 months and understand how, through persistence and resistance and resilience, did they eventually become those men and women that we look up to, like the Scott Harrisons and the Lauren Bush Laurens and the Nahal Mehtas and the Jack Dorseys, the Vin Vacantis, the Richard Bransons, and the other entrepreneurs that I'd eventually feature in Disruptors. And when I sat down with them, some very interesting themes started coming out. So I want to plant an idea in this room, and I hope it becomes the basis for a lot of what we do, and I hope we can kind of discuss these themes and see if there's any validity to them. But it's this idea of embracing failure, realizing optionality, and thinking differently. So how many of you are familiar with a company called Spanx? Oh, there's quite a few. It's a shapewear company created by Sarah Blakely, and she's one of the youngest females in the Forbes billionaire list. And what Sarah credits to her success was the fact that her father used to push her to fail as a child. And I think that's a really wild concept, that what father would do that, and what father would push his daughter to fail. But as we got further into the conversation, what I realized what her father was doing was getting her to think outside of that structured career path that we're so used to operating within. On Wall Street, I was always focused on what my next analyst position would be. Where would I go as an associate? What would it look like as a VP? In any profession, that's always the case. You enter from high school into college, building up this resume with a violin and learning to ace in the SATs and trying to build up this perfect resume that's so someone else accepts you. So you don't get to be creative with that role. What Sarah's father was trying to get her to do was to change that notion that we have around failure. It's okay to fail. Keep failing over and over and over again so you learn more about yourself. And in doing so, he got her to think outside of that structured career path that we're so used to operating in. And every single night, he would ask her, Sarah, what had you failed at today? And if she didn't give him a good enough answer, she had disappointed him. So he was getting her to take risks when the implications didn't matter so much, when nobody was really relying on her at the time, so that she doesn't wake up 40 years later regretting it. And in doing so, while everybody else was operating in that path and finding what they should put on their resume and what would look good for someone else, Sarah was dressing up as Mickey Mouse in Disney World and finding these other random pockets of innovation where she was learning more about herself and failing until she eventually stumbled on Spanx. So you might look at me, and that's the way Sarah tells a story. So you might look at me and say, okay, that's only one case. And you know what? Everybody's talking about this idea of failing forward and how it's important to fail to become big. And I understand. I mean, that's become a big theme in the last year especially. But I'm not talking about the act of failing itself. I'm talking about the mental capacity to withstand failure and struggles. And it's the ability to go through those failures and actually still stick with it and stick with the idea that I'm going to stick with my passion and not going to go back and take the secure route. And I think the best story that manifests it is another man that I met for Disruptors, Kunal Mehta, who was a young Indian male, and he told his parents, I don't want to be a doctor or an engineer. So it was quite a shock that went to their family household. And he instead said, I want to be working in business. So he went and got a job he went to UPenn's Wharton the business school, the undergraduate business school. And he got an offer from Goldman Sachs. And he said, I don't want to work at Goldman Sachs. So he turned away the best firm on Wall Street also. And he said, I want to be an entrepreneur. That's the kind of business I want to be a part of. I want to be innovating, and I want to be creating these ventures that I'm proud of and that I can actually create. So it's during the dot-com boom of the 90s, and he's building, and he stumbles on a venture. He secures $2 million in angel funding because they have so much faith in what he's going to create. And for 1 year, that's all he talks about. He tells all of his friends about it. He tells them, I'm not going to do Wall Street because this is really what I'm passionate about. You guys go make your 70, 80 grand a year. This is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to take a salary. I'm going to build this for the next year. Posts it everywhere. This is all he's talking about. When you go and look his name up, he's on every single blog. He's talking about with all of his friends. All of his pictures are revolving around the idea. And he's really staked his entire reputation into this idea for 1 year. Now imagine going back to those same people a year later. So the dot-com bubble burst, and Nahal was forced to file for bankruptcy. So for 1 year, he's been touting this big idea, and he has to go back to those same people. He's put his reputation on the line and tell them, I failed. And these are all of his friends. Some of them were friends hoping he'd succeed, and some of them were hoping, let's just see how this plays out for him, so then I can take a risk after also. And he failed. So most rational people at that point would turn around and say, you know what, this didn't work out, I'm going to get a job. But Nahal knew that this wasn't an overnight success story. And that overnight success story is a metric that's become so big in the last couple of years that Nahal's story kind of manifests the reason why it's not so true. He knew he just had to get better at becoming an entrepreneur and learn more about the process. And he struggled through, and he took some redeeming qualities from that venture that had just failed, began building it out again, and within 4 years sold that to Omnicom. He then took the money from that and built 3 or 4 more companies that were extremely successful because he got so good at the process that took 7, 8, 9, 10 years to actually build a company. He's now a philanthropist in New York, and he's closed a $55 million funding round because he's so good at startups, and he understands them so well that he can invest in other mobile ventures. So he works at ENIAC Ventures now. So that's another story of that this isn't an overnight success process. It's going to take longer. It's going to take quite a bit of time, which is one of the lessons I learned in Disruptors. So this final idea of realizing optionality and the embracing failures and the thinking differently, I had the privilege of working with an organization called Charity Water for about 2 years, and I left recently to work on a mobile venture of my own. But the story of Charity Water, I think, shows this idea of realizing optionality, not in the story of the startup itself, but in the story of its founder. So Scott Harrison is a nightclub promoter in New York City, and he is a poster boy for all things vice. Budweiser and Bacardi are paying him to drink their alcohol publicly. He's dating models, he's driving nice cars, he has a beautiful penthouse loft, and this is kind of what the people on Wall Street really love, and this is the life that they want. It's a life that I would like too. So he's doing all these things, and he's living this great life by all material standards, but he hit this cathartic moment of reflection where he said, I'm not happy with the legacy I'm leaving behind for my family, and I really want to be doing something different. I want to be someone different, but I don't know how. So like most people at that point, Scott sold everything and moved to Africa and said, I'm going to do a service trip. And I'm going to try that out for a year. I'm going to learn a little bit more about myself. So what Scott saw on that trip is something that I had the unique privilege of seeing recently when we went to Ethiopia through Charity Water. And we were driving for miles and miles and miles through this complete barren land in Tigray, Ethiopia. It's in the northern part. And we come upon this small school. That's where we were driving towards. It's a shack where 700 students every single day kind of gather to learn and to study. But we went down to the local water source. So it was a 1-mile hike down some pretty treacherous terrain. And we hit this narrow ravine of water where there's a donkey defecating, there's kids bathing, there's insects in the water, and at the bottom of the ravine is a mother who's taking water from one bucket, pouring it through her dress to block out all the insects and the sticks, and pouring into another cup, which she's then taking this water back to cook in and to feed her family with. And this is leading to some of the illnesses that Scott saw on his trip: dysentery, diarrhea, flesh-eating bacteria, tumors, and other waterborne illnesses. So Scott said, you know what, I realize that I've done that career, I want to be doing something different, I want to build a nonprofit because water is such a basic elemental need, which is kind of the gut instinct that many of us would have. You know, we've been inspired by a moment, let's come back and try to set up a nonprofit. So Scott came back and he said, he went to investors and said, this is the nonprofit idea I have, and they kind of just laughed him out of the room. They said, you are trying to set up a nonprofit, everybody's doing that, how are you different? Because nonprofits are a black hole of funding. I put $1 in, how much is actually going to the people in need? Is it 20 cents, is it 10 cents? How much are you going to eat up in overhead? You were a nightclub promoter, how are you possibly going to run a nonprofit? So Scott is a visionary entrepreneur who thought differently about the problem he was faced with, and he realized that he has options about the kind of structure he can set up around this nonprofit. He doesn't have to go with the archaic models that have been built before. And he flipped the entire thing on its head and said 100% of public donations will now go directly to the field. And I'll achieve that by setting up a separate bank account that will fund operations to make that happen. So when someone from the public gives $1, I will take that dollar, give it exactly to the person in need, I'll show them through GPS where that dollar has gone, and the operations to make that happen will be covered by a separate bank account that never touches one another. And in doing that, and thinking differently about these problems, and embracing the failures that they had in the early days, which they had many, Charity Water's had incredible success. They've kind of impacted close to 6 million people in over 24 countries by building something like 16,000 water projects. So it's another great organization. I think it's impact that matters. I'm not going to go on and on. I'd love to open this up a little bit more, but I think just one final thought that I wanted to leave with was this idea that there's this craziness and there's this sexiness around entrepreneurship and startups that's gotten a little bit absurd. It's really all anybody wants to talk about, and there's some people have these assumptions about a big bubble forming, which is a whole other topic. But I think the big problem with startups and entrepreneurship is that it's become more of a PR piece. It's more about what is the entrepreneur themselves saying about a venture that might not actually exist. I mean, there's a big case that's out right now with Theranos and Holmes, who is considered to be one of the big billionaires. And they're saying that the New York Times did an expose that says that maybe they were actually never actually building anything. So you can look into these startups because it's these big PR pieces, and it's who's on the cover of Forbes and who's on the cover of TechCrunch and who's being talked about on Twitter and who has the best blog in the space, which is making entrepreneurship and startups seem like it's something that everybody wants to be a part of. But I think the bottom line, and speaking to the 40, 50 entrepreneurs I spoke with, is that what's most inspiring about them is the fact that these are men and women that have withstood so much failure and so much criticism and really struck out on their own paths, not for the wealth and not for that fame, but I think just because they wanted to do something that they truly cared about. And I think that begins with this idea of embracing failure, realizing optionality, and thinking differently about those problems. So thanks so much for having me. I'd love to kind of discuss this now or some questions and stuff. Thank you. Please. So I'm still looking, and I think that's what I realized is that when I was looking in those first 6 months, 7 months to a year, trying to find, okay, what do I want to spend the next 20 years, 30 years working on, I realize it's quite different now, where there's so much mobility between careers, and I can work on a venture for a while. What my passion is I'm realizing it's just building things, and I want to try to build, and I like working in education. And we're working on a venture now called Unfold, and this is going to sound a little pitchy and promotional, so I apologize for that in advance, but you can check it out on getunfold.com and sign up. But the idea is that how do we communicate stories in classrooms better? And it's how do we find these stories of the people that have inspired us in the past? And that's what we're working around right now. So I like writing, and I like the storytelling aspect of what Charity Water's done with telling the stories of people in developing countries. So we're kind of advancing along that same path. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think what really came out was the fact that they can't, because I think at that point when I was approaching them, I was like, how did you do it? And I was coming from a very perspective of desperation. Like I was looking, and my savings account was running out. And basically what they were saying is that you just have to go and start doing stuff and trying new things and seeing what really ticks with you, what makes you enjoy it. Because it's very easy to sit, like what I had done when I was 15 or 16, where I was like, oh, finance and Wall Street sounds interesting. That makes me sound like a very boring person. But it's very easy from a perspective of sitting back and saying, okay, this might be interesting, as opposed to actually trying it out and seeing if it's something that works out. And I think the good part about like what a lot of these startups have done is that they let you take internships at them for 2 months, and the big corporations are actually helping that happen. They give you a sabbatical to go work somewhere else and come back, so you're a better employee. And I think it's the idea of trying all these things out, which is what the entrepreneurs have said themselves, is going through the entire process of learning what about them make them tick. And then they work in that venture for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So. Is there anybody else? Yes, sir.
As an academic, I'm afraid to ask if you need a college degree in order to be a successful entrepreneur.
So I'm scared. But I think so Eric and I actually were talking about this a lot today, because colleges have kept pace now. I think they're really starting to keep pace with the skills that, so it used to be classrooms where the professor was at the front and we would all sit back and just listen and take everything in, come in for a test and hope to pass. Now colleges have become breeding grounds, and I've been speaking at all the big universities and going all over, and I'm realizing that the colleges really have a fire under them where they're looking how they can build more innovative environments. And they're building out these accelerators and these startup hubs, because I've had friends that didn't go to college, and they struggle when they go into a room to professionally pitch an idea, because college didn't give them that foundation. They didn't get that foundation anywhere else. They haven't made that network of the engineers or the lawyers or the designers, because as an entrepreneur, I'm trying to focus on 10 channels, and I can try to do sales, marketing, and partnerships, but I need a friend who's going to handle the tech and the design, and someone else who will handle kind of legal work and all those aspects. I think college is another breeding ground for those kind of relationships. In the classroom, what has worked and what I've seen is in working with some of these, the entrepreneurship departments, is that they're creating these pitch competitions. And they're giving students a chance to, if they don't want to be an entrepreneur, it's going to work as an intrapreneur too when they go and work in a big company. They're helping them start off in small micro projects that are funded by L'Oreal or funded by a big company to come in, and you work on a 3-month project with a team, and now they're equipped to go and either build it by themselves or they're equipped to go and build it for a huge organization. So I think the fact that colleges are keeping pace with this is huge, but the ones that are dropping off and haven't kept pace with the entire entrepreneurship kind of revolution that's going on it's a little bit of a challenge, but which is also that's something that's going on in corporate. Goldman Sachs just hired, I think about a year ago, they hired an campus ambassador, which is a term that we hear at startups. We hear it at Facebook and Google, but now they're trying to hire campus ambassadors who are going to make their workplace more fun to live in, and more like nap pods and all those perks that startups have, because they realize that the applications for employment at JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs are going down because people now want to work at startups instead. So I think it's a very interesting dichotomy between the corporations and the colleges also. So, but it'd be interesting to hear your perspective on that as a professor.
I talk to students every day.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm wondering what I should be saying to students. Here's the way I think about it, I guess. We want our students to be successful.
Right.
We want to add our value to their career path. And we want that to be a meaningful relationship or a building foundation for that student, one at a time. I hope we do that.
Yeah. I absolutely, and I think Silicon Valley has this wrong, because I think the human interaction, the way I've learned from professors in the classroom, is something that can't really be replaced by a robot in the front of the room. And Silicon Valley is pushing towards that model of what they want is more students behind a computer somewhere else, and you log in and you try to learn. But I think the fact that classrooms have also evolved into more discussions and less of a teacher having a syllabus and going down and talking to the students about that, I think that's what I've been seeing across the board, is that everybody's cognizant of that and is moving in that direction, because that's what the students are asking for also.
You're going to visit my class tomorrow morning.
I can't wait.
So I just looked you up at goodunfold.com, and it sounds like it's a network tool. Is that what it is?
It is, yeah, it is a network tool.
Have you heard of Periscope?
I have heard of Periscope, yeah.
I just saw the article on the news show the other day. So they've been out for 6 months.
Right.
and they're partnered with Twitter,
Right.
and they've got 50 billion
Right.
users.
Yeah.
And it's live video feed with Twitter input instantly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I see this
So you're
could
asking me
be-
why? Why am I doing this?
Well, but I see yours is more of a written and interactive.
Yeah.
It has a professional focus. So how do you feel like could
Yeah,
detail
so-
on that?
So the way we're looking at it is that the multimedia feeds of Facebook and Twitter, it's basically where you go and you post links to videos, you post pictures of yourself, statuses, updates, all those things. Those have been unbundled. So Instagram only focused on photography. Vine and Periscope only focused on video, and Vine is doing kind of you upload. Periscope is more live feed, and ours is articles, because the Facebook algorithm is now adopting where a lot of people go to Facebook only to find their news. But the way we're seeing it is that I'm not friends with people on Facebook because they're going to push out the best content to me. So I was actually talking to someone earlier about an Eric Ries article that I'd love to read, but now I've met him only once, and I don't know how to get that. So the idea is that I can follow the most inspirational people for the content that they're going to push out. So if they found a really interesting piece in startups, how will they get it across to me? I follow them the same way I would follow someone on Instagram for photography, I would follow them here for articles. So in classrooms, a professor has a really good piece of content he wants to push out to a classroom and foster a conversation around it. They can push it out, he or she can push it out through Unfold to that network of that classroom so they can all collaborate. So now I can follow top designers to learn about their spaces and only focus it exclusively on that. But like you said, it's a network, which is its own challenge, and we're taking a little bit of a risk, and we're getting pushback from some investors. Other investors are excited about it, because that's the kind of process that we're going through right now. And I think the same thing is that when we get that pushback, Snapchat did it, Instagram's done it, Twitter's done it. There's hundreds of people who've tried it, but we see it as we're designing a good product, we're designing something that we think people need, and the early tests have seen how they're using it out. So we keep adopting as we get users on. So we're launching publicly in a few months from now, but right now we have beta group tests telling us how will they make this network more powerful. So the idea is to bring on early influencers pretty into the product early, so we have someone out there on there that other people would want to see what they're reading, and that's the idea for what we're going into with. But I mean, I'd love, and this isn't promotional, but I'd love to. If you guys sign up here, I'd love to get your thoughts on the product as you're playing around with it, because it's so easy to get into the hands of friends, and they give you a very biased perspective. But it's more interesting when a complete stranger emails you and says, "Oh, I love this," or "Oh, I hated this and I'll never use it," because then it saves 2 months of my life and figuring out whether I should keep doing it or not. So it's good to keep getting that feedback. So if you all sign up and try it out, I'd love to kind of continue that conversation. Yeah. Right, yeah. We haven't approached Shark Tank yet. We're approaching, so it's always like it's a very fair balance, and what we're trying to find is how much equity do we have to give up and how much can we bootstrap. So this is something Eric and I were talking about all day today, is that right now, for me, equity is worth everything of this idea, and I'd rather take a hit on my salary and kind of operational costs and pay things out of savings. But like Shark Tank, for example, they take so much away from a lot of these companies. Some of them deserve it, some of them don't. But I think so we've been speaking with a lot of VCs right now and angel investors to come in and help us out and structure the deal that's more favorable, and looking for like media partnerships to bring us to the forefront of it all. But it's a very interesting process, the entire negotiation, and it's really 1 week can change everything. So I can take a deal a month ago when I didn't really have a product, or I can hope that in 4 months from now I have a product with 50 million users, and then I'm in the driving seat of the venture conversations. So it's really seeing how far out we can stretch it out. Keep going. Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm literally regurgitating everything that these people have told me, so I'll keep doing that. But yeah, absolutely.
First of all, Kunal, could I get you to sign my book
Of course.
before you leave?
It goes down in value once I do that, though, so you have to.
Okay, great, thank you. in talking to these entrepreneurs, how often and how important do they talk about being problem solvers? And the second part, as you travel around universities, are universities attempting to develop problem solvers in the classroom?
Yeah. So from the entrepreneur's perspective, the problem-solving piece, it was interesting because I always wanted to know, it kind of alludes back to the passion question from before, but it was, how do they develop that idea? Because I would everybody's calling themselves an entrepreneur right now. You could be sitting in a bathtub hoping for an idea to hit you, and I'm an entrepreneur. So I always wanted to know how they identify that problem that they want to solve, and how did that evolve over time. And I thought that there would be like a unique breaking moment where they all of a sudden just found it and then they went after it. But it was never really like that. It was kind of like Scott Harrison's case. He saw something that happened, and then the mission evolved over time. But for Unfold, for something like this, it just happened by chance. I was on these book tours, and students would ask me, can you send us that article? And I didn't want to give them Facebook or email. And it kind of started evolving as a problem that I was seeing in my personal life. And then other problems that are being solved, I think in social impact, it's the easiest. It's a problem, we see it, and we have to address it. But then there's other entrepreneurs like Ben Milne from Douala, who is doing mobile payments and making that easier. So it usually started in a pain point that they had, and then they began to try to digest it, but they were working on something else at the time. So Ben Milne was selling speakers out of his garage, didn't want to pay credit card fees, and then began building that. So I think they've identified a problem in their own personal space, as opposed to sitting down and being like, oh, what do I want to do as an entrepreneur? I think they were better to tackle that. And that's actually something I'm seeing with the VC funds also, is that their theses have switched away from investing in just any startup, but they want to invest in entrepreneurs who have a personal kind of vested interest in that space. So they're looking at us and saying, well, none of you guys were in news, so what's your angle? None of you guys were in media, what's your angle? And they're investing in like fintech startups from bankers who have been in there for 10 years and in lateral spaces. In universities, the problem-solving piece, I haven't been, I think, that exposed to inside the classrooms, but again, I think the accelerators are doing that. So they're presenting students with a problem that they've seen in the university, or a corporation has given them that this is a problem that we're trying to address. So have an engineer, a developer, a designer, and a business guy work on this together and present us with a solution. I think the hard part is finding that problem. I think because these problems aren't so apparent. It's not just an obvious problem is what I'm noticing, and that's what I was hoping, is that an obvious problem would just hit me and I'd start working on it. I'm not sure if that really answers it, but. Neil?
Hi, thank you.
Thank you.
Does your startup Unfold have a specific physical location that you operate out of, and can you be successful with a technology product like this not being in Silicon Valley? And how about Columbus, Ohio?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, is that me? Sorry. Oh. That's the beauty of it, and Eric, we were talking about this earlier, is that New York is so expensive, and just to quote rent prices, I mean, for a small place in the city, it's costing us like $1,800 for a box, and the office space that we're all paying for is very little. But the best part about these tech products is that we can work out of anywhere, and I'm seeing startup hubs popping up in Des Moines, Iowa, and they're popping up like all over Ohio, we were talking earlier. And it makes so much more sense for entrepreneurs to relocate, build a product for 8 or 9 months, and then come back. If they're working in media or finance, it makes sense to be in New York. Or if they're working in kind of agriculture, move to a different state. So it's really where the industry is going to be, but that process of building the product and fleshing it out, you could really be anywhere. And I think they're decentralized in Silicon Valley, where there's, in my own opinion, there's a little bit of an arrogance there in Silicon Valley now, and they still think that they're the startup hub, and they've created that reputation, but there's great investors in every single city. And we're speaking with investors out of Colombia right now who they have so much experience, and they're gonna help us build this out in a way that we wouldn't really have had that support in Silicon Valley, who are looking only after metrics. They're not looking for products and ideas and teams right now. And I think that's the beauty of tech, is you can build it anywhere. You can build it from a basement, you can build it out of Medellin or Cartagena, and you'll still be able to build a product and bring it to market pretty quickly. So, yes.
I'm wondering, you mentioned Eric Ries, and a lot of corporations have been very excited about Lead Startup, which
Yeah.
was initially for startups. I'm wondering how you see how transferable what you're talking about is for corporations. And if there isn't a large component, or maybe even a major component of what you're doing, it's really more of a lifestyle of living creatively and
Right.
just putting it out there and making mistakes and living with that kind of passion wherever you are.
Right. And so there's a really interesting, and the term startup has shifted, and people, I sometimes make the mistake too of calling Google a startup. And that's the interesting dichotomy of what I'm facing, is that I'm saying escape from corporate America, but all the startups that I want to work for are now corporations. But for example, Google has this, and it starts off with Eric Ries's MVP model: build a minimum viable product and put it out there, and it takes only 2-3 months of your time, and see how users react, and then keep iterating on that. Google has come out with these design sprints that I think are even more beneficial for organizations or kind of young entrepreneurs that are going after it, where they're 5-day design sprints that teams work around. And I think that's how they fit it into their corporate culture. So an entire team will come together, and I'll take your card after and send you kind of the information on it if it helps, but they work amazing. I mean, we did that, and we do that internally also for every feature set that we launch, and we are able to put things out a lot quicker. Because the teams are very focused around who has to fix on what feature and what the end product's going to be, and it involves the cycle, the loop involves user feedback, and it involves kind of really every hand that you need: the legal, the business, the sales, where everybody's going to feed into that product from. So I can send that to you. I think that adopts better to a larger corporation than, because Eric Ries's model is great, and there's been some pushback by. Actually, Steve Blank just wrote an article about how the MVP doesn't really work anymore, because that was built for web-based startups. But when you're looking at apps, you need a perfect app to go into someone's hand, because nobody's really downloading things anymore. They'll download an app and they'll delete it right away if they didn't like it. So you can't put out a basic prototype anymore. And actually, I have a friend working at a company, I can't say the name, but she's working at a company who was going through that model of the MVP. And they put so much money behind it, and they put the app out, hoping for the same exact thing, and the users completely destroyed it. So, because once you have the ratings on the App Store, there's no bouncing back from that. So I think that's why the MVP model might not work in those kind of spaces, but the Google Design Sprint works a little bit better. Oh.
Entrepreneurs need people.
Right.
All right. So what are some of the attributes that someone who would go and work for an entrepreneur need to have?
For the people that will come and work for an entrepreneur. So, yeah, I think so. I'm
Because you're talking about creativity and
Right.
speed and all of that. So
Right.
what do you think? Because we have students that might want to
Yeah.
go work for these
Yeah,
entrepreneurs.
I have two perspectives on that now, because then I'll start from the earlier perspective of when I was looking for a job at a startup. About 3 years ago, I was looking for a job at a startup, and I would hand in my resume, and it said investment banking, sales and trading, GPA. It was a very generic resume. And I wasn't kind of really getting any calls back. And I think it was every person in finance and business that was looking for these roles, and nobody was differentiating themselves. So that's kind of where the book began, and the entire process of learning some other skills, taking some other courses, seeing how I can really add value. I didn't know what the right answer was at that point. Then I started working at Charity Water and slowly rose up, and then started taking resumes in for a new finance position. And I got the same thing again. It was resumes in investment banking and trading and consulting that wanted to work. And the ones that stuck out to me were the ones that were doing something slightly different, a lateral skill set that was, and that's going to apply now as I'm looking to hire for Unfold, is I'm trying to do, again, the 10 things that I'm juggling before: the design, the legal, the sales, the partnerships. Someone that's not going to bring just a generic skill set, but someone that's learned something on top of that. So if they're doing sales and partnerships, they've done a course in design as well. And now they have a combined skill set and a perspective on 2 different worlds that I don't have, because I need to supplement all my shortcomings pretty quickly, or this app is going to fail. So when we hired the developer and the product guy that are working on this, it was completely just taking away any work that I didn't know how to do. So he just runs with it. and I don't know how he does what he does, but I have complete faith in the fact that he's going to do a good job at it because of his experiences and because of the perspective that he's bringing to the table. So I can think like a business person, but I need someone that's going to think in two different ways. So the advice that I've been giving college students all along is that if you're doing a business program, you're already a leg up from so many people. And the problem is that some of us think that as business students, I always just think this, I don't know if it's still the case, is that we're kind of just a dime a dozen, that you can find a tech engineer can find a business person anywhere. And we're not really bringing much to the table, which I don't think is the case. These product and these tech guys need someone to package up a product and sell it and put it out there, otherwise it's worthless. But if a business person now knows how to speak design, or now knows how to speak a little bit of tech, or now knows how the legal structures of a startup work, they're all of a sudden so much more attractive to hire than someone who's just done banking and consulting, which are huge skill sets in itself. So that's what I'm looking for, is someone that has multiple avenues that they can bring to a startup. So, sorry.
How important do you feel it is to create a community around your startup? Because if you have a community,
Yeah.
you start to get traction in the application.
Yeah.
So how do you build on?
Do you mean internally or externally?
People start to say, oh yes, I belong to, or I log into Get Unfold to find
Right.
out X, Y, and Z.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's huge, and I think in the influencer network, there's one of our competitors that's doing this right now. Who they've put a couple of the big names that are using it. They had a couple months before us, and it's huge because they get all the press. But I think that, and we have to do it. We have to do it to succeed. Build that external community, get people to start talking about it, generate that buzz. But the problem with doing that, and I think that's the big problem, like I mentioned Theranos before, and this entire PR buzz piece that goes on in startups, is that startup founders focus so much on that they never really build a good product. And they've spent the entire, so one of the chapters in the book, this guy Ben Milne from Dwala said that the entire time, too many startups ride waves of PR. So they get a big release in like a TechCrunch article, and then they get a Forbes piece, and then someone's writing a book about them, and then all of a sudden, so they feel like they're succeeding when they actually haven't built a product that was worth mentioning in the first place. And what's going on is, I think Silicon Valley is like they're calling it the myth-making machine, is that they've invested money in the startups, so they want them to get out there and build this external community and get the buzz around it so the valuation starts to shoot up, so there's more downloads. But the product itself was never really built out the right way. So while we have to do that, because that's feeding into the kind of the market that we're entering into, and I sometimes fall victim to that, and then my partners pull me back and they're like, let's focus on product and then we'll go do that after. Let's focus on press after. Let's build the product right now. So it's a fine balance between the two, because if there's only 3 of us doing it, we're all unpaid right now, we're trying to figure out where is the best use of our time right now. And that's such a big piece, but it's figuring out how do we build the best product while also doing that at the same time. So, is anybody else? Yeah.
Of the entrepreneurs that you interviewed, and when they hit that point where they're like, yes, I failed, was it more likely that they would pivot at that point and take their existing entity in a new direction, or did they just create an entirely new entity and scrap what they had?
Yeah, so two things on this. Vin Vacanti, you should read his blog. It's so good. But he's the founder of Yipit, and he left Blackstone. It's a big finance firm, and he left Blackstone after seeing Mark Zuckerberg speaking at a conference, and he was just like, what am I doing? We're the same age, and I'm sitting in Blackstone. I should be doing something. So he left kind of in the same way that I left, where I was like, I'll figure it out after. He went through, I think over 3 years, he went through 8 startups that failed. But he doesn't see it like that. And I think once he walked me through it, and once he walked a lot of people through it, they're like, you're a genius. You're absolutely right for doing what you did. Is that the first one took him to put out an app that he thought people would use, took him 9 months to put out there. And because it was the first time doing it. Then after that, the second one took a little bit less time, where the 8th one was only taking a couple of weeks to really push something out. And that's the one that worked, because he was just getting better and better at the process. They were completely different ideas, but his learnings were pivoting. So he was learning how to put out an MVP or a design sprint pretty quickly. And so the idea might be different because he found something in the first failure that worked. So Kunal Mehta took redeeming qualities out of that failed venture to just pivot slightly and build something on that. And then he always stayed within like the mobile communities that they were building around that. Vin Vacanti went from commerce to, I don't even know what I think he tried to build a network also at one point. Then he went to commerce, and he tried out these different things until he finally hit it. In terms of failing and pivoting, so I think I had began this journey a while ago by working on that medical startup called Outpatient, and it was a quick few weeks process. And I was saying I was working on that, but pretty quickly we realized that the legal costs of starting that were going to be too high. And then we spoke to 100 doctors, and they were like, you know what, it's a great idea, but, and this is something we never thought about, they're like, patients aren't going to feel comfortable getting on the camera when they just got out of bed. They're not going to feel comfortable getting on Skype with a stranger. And it's something we never thought about. And then we started talking to patients, they're like, yeah, I'd rather go in the doctor's office and feel more comfortable with that. So while it's a failure that it didn't work, we quickly pivoted away from it because we realized that's not something we wanted to work on. With this, we keep hitting a new so we set milestones for ourselves, and if we don't hit it, we're like, okay, it's a failure. But we're seeing that we keep hitting them. Our users are using it. We're getting the engagement that we wanted. We're getting more signups, and people are excited about the product we're building and we put it in their hands. So until we hit that point, we won't see a need to pivot, but if we do, we know how to get through the entire process quicker. So we know how to do a design sprint much faster now. We know how to interact with users and how to measure analytics. So we can take all those learnings to kind of repurpose them towards a new venture. So. Sorry. Yeah.
Mine's kind of twofold. What kind of population base are you going after? Kind of like, obviously there's billions of people on Facebook.
Yeah.
So you're not necessarily going after the college to the 30-year-olds. And what kind of differentiates that from Huffington Post and the Onion, the two different ones?
Right. So. Oh, sorry. He was asking there's billions of people using Facebook, so how are we going after that market? Like, who is our market right now? How do we take away market share from them? And then how are we different from the Huffington Post or the Onion? So the Facebook piece, I mean, we're obviously going to beat them, so it's not really a big challenge there. But I think Facebook, I mean, they've killed it. They've done so well, and they can really pivot in any industry they want. They're going into healthcare now. They're going into everything they want. The market that we're going after is people that read news on their mobile device. So I think the numbers around that, like in January of this year, there was 1.1 billion people worldwide that had only visited the top 50 mobile news sites. So news consumption is now shifting from web-based to mobile-based. So people are reading in the train, they're reading quick stories. So that's the audience that we're going after, and that's anywhere from an 18-year-old reading an article for a classroom, or the 35-year-old going on the way to work, reading kind of news or some stories or some blogs that came out. The way we're different from the big publications that have come out is that this is all based around the person sharing it. So it's me building identity around the stuff that I'm curating across the web. So I'm curating the best, in my opinion, I'm curating the best startup articles, the best Wall Street to entrepreneurship articles. I'm pushing out my own pieces also. So now you guys are following me because you know I'm going to curate the best stuff for you, and I'm going to deliver it right to your mobile device, as opposed to you going to Huffington Post and trying to find that stuff, or going to the Onion, or going to the New York Times. I'm finding it for you, and I'm delivering it. So now the identities that people are building are based around their industry. So if you log on and you say your industry is agriculture, or your industry is comedy, you're going to be pushing out the best stuff to become known for that. And that's how we're looking at it. So Instagram had celebrities because they started pushing out the best photography for the food that they're eating, or like the sites that they were seeing. So those are the celebrities around there, or just friends. So the higher case use cases for Unfold are the influencers, and the lower case ones are, if I want to just share this with 5 of my friends, what's the easiest way to do that? An email gets lost. On Facebook I can send a message, but it's not meant for that. There's other noise, there's status updates, there's pictures. And Unfold, you can have a conversation around a piece of content. So the users that have been using it have been kind of really building their identity around the content they're pushing.
As a follow-up, would that mean you guys might be acquired by, Google has over 185 subscribers they've bought since 2000, or Apple News with the most recent update with 6S.
Yeah.
Came out with Apple News.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like.
Right. So I mean, there's so many, and the news curation and algorithms that have been coming out. So Apple News, Flipboard, Circa, they all operate in the same space. They're all algorithms that you type in your likes and your dislikes. So I'm interested in startups, I'm interested in fashion. And they try their best to push the best content to you, but it's machine learning, and there's nothing pulling you back in. Our hypothesis is that your friends know you best. So if I've had a conversation with my friend at a bar about something we're talking about, he'll send me an article on Unfold the next day that refers directly to that. So for example, I mean, this is not a very sophisticated example, but my friends knew that I like Star Wars. So when the latest Star Wars trailer came out, they shared it on Unfold, and they shared a piece about the entire process behind the direction of it. So my friends know me best, whereas these machine learning apps might not know me at all. So that's our hypothesis as we're going into it. And it's working because they see it that if you want to share a piece with 6 other people, or you know someone's going to curate the best stuff. As far as your acquisition, I mean, that'd be great if we're acquired by Google, but I think the acquisitions also sometimes, this is my perspective right now is also we're building this right now. So we kind of want to see how far we can go. Google hasn't come knocking yet, so if they do, we'll see what happens at that point. Yeah.
I had a question about investors, because I'm looking at opening a business also, and I was going to first ask you, is there like some formula where you only want investors to invest so much so that you still own the company?
Yeah.
But then you mentioned angel investors, so I thought I'd ask you about that as well.
Right, yeah, so I'm learning so much about this process every day, and I'm trying to figure out the right balance between how much we need and to hit what milestone. So there's actually a really good book that you should pick up. It's called Venture Deals by Brad Feld, and he's a pretty prominent investor. He's based out of Colorado. But the way we're looking at it is a lot of the deals are now being structured on the early rounds when you're doing your first round as Y Combinator is one of the big accelerators. And they have a SAFE vehicle. It's called SAFE. It's basically a convertible note, and you don't need to know all the mechanics of how these work, but basically it pushes the valuation of the company down to a later date. And you take a small piece now, and once you raise your next round, that's when the valuation is decided. At this point right now, when it's an idea, it's more of a bet on the founder, and it's more of a bet on the vision that they have, and the team that they've assembled around them. So those are 3 things that they're kind of looking for right now, from my opinion. And at later stages, it becomes more about metrics. So how many people have signed up? What is your growth? If it's a reading app like this, how many minutes are people spending on your app every single day? So if you're going into this, I'm not sure what stage you're at, but if you're going into this, you should look at what are my monthly burn rates. And your burn rate is how much money am I spending every single month on my company, and that includes your salary. That includes kind of employee salaries, legal costs that you might have, rent, all those types of things. Server costs get pretty high once you ramp up users, and you multiply that out by, it's going to take me 6 months to get to market when I can start showing metrics, or 12 months or 18 months, and that's kind of what you want to raise with a little bit of buffer room, because this raise process is a pain. It takes months and months and distracts you from product when you should be building. And everybody has a different theory on this. So some have told us raise the bare minimum, get the metrics you need, then go and get the big VCs. Because the angels that came in the bottom at 5, 10, 15,000 will get a bump in valuation pretty quickly. Others have said that the market is frothy and a bubble is coming, so go and raise 18 or 24 months now, so you're covered for the next 2 years, and you can really test and build this. The way we're approaching it is the former, where it's let's build this, not give up too much equity right now. We have a lot of faith in the product, and if it doesn't work, we don't want to be doing this for the next 2 years. We'd rather know that we can get through these next 6 months, and we can work with investors that are the right investors to help bring this to market and get those metrics, and then we'll work with the bigger funds. So it's really whatever you feel comfortable with at what point. And there's so many resources out there to find these investors. There's one called AngelList, which is really good. So there's a lot on there. A lot of investors don't respond to cold emails, is from what I've heard, is that they're getting so many emails a day. So the best bet is like introductions. So you can plug in a name into LinkedIn and see if you're connected, and then get an introduction there. A pitch deck is a big piece, and there's a couple of good resources out there. What some of the big companies have used as their pitch decks to put it together. We have one also. It's not exactly proprietary, so I can send that to you guys also. But the pitch deck is really what leads into the conversation. If they're excited about your vision, and then they'll take a meeting and you can pitch it to them in person. Yeah.
Hi, I have a question. Have you heard about the WeChat social media? That's very, very popular back in China. If you ever heard of it, and what's your opinion of it?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah. So what's your opinion of it comparing with the, you never heard of it?
No, I have heard of it. I'm not sure how it works. I've heard of WeChat, and I know
Uh-huh.
it's blowing up, but I'm not sure. I've never actually used it.
Okay,
So,
okay.
What?
I'm just curious. Yeah, because it's a social media that software gets so popular. It's like almost everyone in China is using it.
Okay.
And you know, I know even Facebook is very, very popular here, but it's not controlling the whole population. And that one is, you know, so popular, like almost everyone. And it also can do, you know, not only the test, but also the media and other.
Oh, so is it similar to WhatsApp, or is it?
Yeah,
It's
a little bit.
Sorry,
yeah.
I'll download it and I'll try it out.
Yeah, when you get the chance, maybe,
Yeah.
yeah, you can take a look at it.
Yeah, I'll take a look at it. Thanks.
Thank you. We have a couple of things for you before you depart. Well, actually, you're here tomorrow, too. As I told Kunal, he couldn't have picked two better days to be in Ohio, because about 2 months from now, won't matter if he's in New York City or Ohio.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
First, we have some goodies in there for him, and probably one of the best things in there are the Cheryl's cookies with your own little Otterbein University logo. And the next time you get up to walk down the streets of New York City, as opposed to putting on your NYU shirt, you can put on your Otterbein University shirt. Thanks again. I appreciate your time. I appreciate everybody's time for coming out. I know that these are evening events, but I think there was a lot of good information here tonight, both for students, for adults, for those that are starting up their own companies, and those that are looking to maybe leave the corporate world and get into the entrepreneurship world. But as Kunal said, there is that entrepreneur word there, that you don't have to leave corporate life to be an entrepreneur. You can still stay within that organization.